Good afternoon. My name is Ruby Donaldson, and I will be doing the presentation for my Building Leadership Internship with Dr. Wilkerson. Today I'm presenting Activity 1, Case Study 5.3, Achieving a Culturally Sensitive Teaching Approach. This case focuses on culturally responsive teaching, ethical leadership, and turbulence in educational settings. Throughout this presentation, I will explain how this case connects to culturally responsive practices, the professional standards of educational leadership, and ethical paradigms described by Shapiro and Stefkovich. Activity 1 required researching culturally responsive teaching and applying it to Case Study 5.3. This activity aligns directly with PSEL Standard 3, Equity and Cultural Responsiveness. This standard states that effective educational leaders strive for equity of educational opportunity and culturally responsive practices to promote each student's academic success and well-being. In this case, Ms. Phyllis Regain uses a feminist and social justice approach to teaching. However, the East Asian students felt uncomfortable with her discussion style. Their collective cultural values emphasized harmony and respect for authority. Because the issue involves fairness, equity, and cultural responsiveness, it clearly connects to PSEL Standard 3. During the process to complete this activity, I researched culturally responsive teaching. One of the things I researched was Gay, 2018, and Ladson Billings, 1995. Gay explains that culturally responsive teaching connects instruction to students' cultural backgrounds without lowering expectation. Ladson Billings emphasizes academic success, cultural competence, and critical consciousness. After reviewing the research, I analyzed Case Study 5.3. I identified the ethical dilemma regarding whether Ms. Regain's contract should be renewed. I then applied the 4 ethical paradigms: justice, care, critique, and profession. Finally, I evaluated the turbulence level and connected the case to the PSEL and NELP standards. From this activity, I learned that culture strongly influences how students participate in class. What feels empowering to one group may feel uncomfortable to another. I also learned that ethical leadership requires balance. The ethics of justice supports fairness and academic freedom. The ethics of care focuses on student well-being. The ethics of critique challenges inequality. And the ethic of profession protects standards and responsibilities. Shapiro and Stefkovich describe turbulence as mild, moderate, or severe. This case reflects moderate to approaching severe because it impacts international partnerships, enrollment, faculty morale, and institutional reputation. When I was researching, I found that Ladson Billing further explains that culturally relative teaching is not just about including diverse materials. It requires teachers to believe in students' abilities and challenge deficient thinking. She argues that when educators assume students from certain backgrounds are less capable, they lower their expectations. In Case Study 5.3, this reminds leaders not to assume that East Asian students are unwilling to think critically, but instead understand how cultural communication styles influence participation. Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory helps explain the difference between collectivist and individualist cultures. In collectivist cultures, group harmony is prioritized over individual expression. In individual culture, personal voice and independence is encouraged. Ms. Regain's teaching style reflects an individualist academic culture, while her students may come from a collective system. Understanding this framework helps leaders respond thoroughly and thoughtfully instead of reacting defensively. As a future principal, I will apply this knowledge by promoting cultural responsive practices in my school. I will provide professional development to help teachers understand diverse cultural backgrounds. I will also protect academic freedom while supporting student needs. Leaders must avoid reacting emotionally, instead, reflect ethically before making decisions. PSEL Standard 3 reminds leaders to promote equity and cultural responsiveness consistently. Additionally, I will encourage open and respectful dialogue to prevent cultural misunderstandings from escalating into large conflicts. Zaretta Hammond explains that culturally responsive teaching connects to how the brain processes information. When students feel culturally safe and respected, they are more open to high level thinking. If students feel threatened or misunderstood, the brain shifts into a stress mode, which limits learning. This connects directly to ethics of care. Leaders must ensure classrooms feel intellectually challenging but emotionally safe. This case study helped me realize that culturally responsive leadership is much more complex than I originally thought. At first, it might seem like an issue is simply about teaching style conflict. However, after analyzing the case more deeply, I understand that it involves cultural ethics, power, academic freedom, institutional reputation, and student well-being all at the same time. One of the biggest lessons I learned in leadership decisions are rarely black and white. In case study 5.3, Dr. Epstein cannot simply choose between supporting Ms. Regain or supporting the students. Instead, she must consider justice, care, critique, and professional responsibility together. This requires reflection and courage. It also requires slowing down and thinking carefully instead of reacting emotionally or politically. I also learned that cultural misunderstanding can quickly escalate into larger institutional problems. What begins as classroom discomfort can grow into concerns about enrollment, international partnerships, and public image. This is where the concept of turbulence becomes important. Leaders must recognize when a situation affects multiple systems and respond in a way that prevents further escalation. Another important realization for me that equity does not mean avoiding difficult conversations. Ms. Reagan's teaching approach challenges inequality and encourages critical thinking. That is part of higher education. However, culturally responsive leadership means ensuring that students feel safe and supported while engaging in those conversations. It is about creating balance, not eliminating challenge. As a future building principal, I now understand that my role will involve protecting both students and teachers. I need to support culturally responsive instruction while also defending professional standards and academic freedoms. I must create an environment where diverse perspectives are respected and where cultural differences are acknowledged rather than ignored. This activity also reminded me that leadership requires humility. I will not always fully understand the cultural experience of every student and staff member. Because of that, I must be willing to listen, learn, reflect continuously. Leadership is not about having all the answers. It's about guiding the school community through complex situations with fairness, awareness, and integrity. Most importantly, this case reinforced the ethical leadership requires balance. Justice without care can feel cold. Care without justice can feel inconsistent. Critique without professionalism can feel confrontational. Professionalism without reflection can feel rigid. Effective leaders must hold all of these principles together. In conclusion, this case has strengthened my understanding of culturally responsive leadership. It has shown me that during turbulent times, leaders must remain steady, thoughtful, and ethical. As I move forward in my career, I will commit to lead with cultural awareness, reflection, and strong ethical foundation to ensure that students and staff feel valued and respected.